Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to today's video. So this is gonna just be a little bit of a vlog going over some stuff that I learned from the track last time we were out, and I wanted to translate it over to you guys before we go ahead and take this out again. So right now, basically, I'm just taking it out of the trailer. I want to put the street tires back on, and I do have something I want to show you about that, which is slightly alarming, but I already ordered something to fix it, so I'll show you that in a minute. But I mean, yeah, I think we're getting a little more spicy with our burnouts than we were in the past, because I usually don't throw that much rubber up here, which is good though. Needs a little bit of that. So let's go ahead and pull this car out of here, and then I'm going to start going over some of the stuff that I was learning. I might be able to go over the shocks, how that's set up, and pretty much everything that I have learned in the past couple of days, really. And just I wanted to, I don't know, just show you guys what's going on. So the new rundown, the plan to go a little faster, get our 60-foot times down a little bit better, and really just kind of carry off that launch is the big thing. I appreciate everyone that has commented so far. I've learned a lot from you guys, and also on my own research, and I'm looking forward to kind of showing everything, talking about this. I want an open discussion, right? So stuff that you guys see or have heard of, please post down in the comments, and then we'll talk about it and see what we can do to make this thing go faster. So I appreciate it, and let's go ahead and pull this thing out real quick, get you a cold start in, and then we'll go over some stuff. Before I drop this out of the back of the car, notice that my exhaust pipe is off. Ever since I messed with the mid pipes due to the cat delete, it's been off a little bit. So back when I was first lining these up, I put some spacers in there, so I'm gonna go pop those spacers out real quick, get our exhaust tip lined up again. Super small, but something I want to do. All right, there we have it. Looking pretty good, pretty even gap all the way around. I don't know, with you guys, something like that just bugs the ever-living crap out of me. Something as simple as exhaust tips really need to be straight. So if you have a Mustang and they're not straight, please get on that. All right, so now that she's out, I wanted to address a couple things real quick. So first thing I wanted to address, now this is something I haven't touched on before ever, however, it's something that I was looking at. Now, I can't tell for sure, but I'm actually, I don't know, it's real difficult to say. So I can't tell for sure, but I did, oh, actually that one I can definitely tell for sure. So I don't know if you can tell that, but the lug nuts, let's see now. This one in particular does not look straight anymore. And they all have a slight angle going this way, which when the wheel turns that way, it put torque that way. So I went ahead and ordered ARP wheel studs, and we are not going back out to the strip or beating on this car until that gets done. So that's definitely a little sketchy. And then the other side, I think, is in better shape, but if you're putting a freaking, yeah, you can tell they're bent upwards, just this one specifically. So that I think was definitely a bullet dodged. I went ahead and got ARP NHRA approved extended wheel studs, and the reasoning for that, I can't find the short ones that are normal stock length, so whatever, they require an open-ended lug nut. So we're gonna go ahead and do that before we do anything else with this thing. As far as I wanted to speak to the rear end strength real quick on this car. So I have never heard of anyone breaking a GT500 like axle, like the actual axle inside the axle tube. I've heard of plenty of differential failures, the actual diff going bad, which is replaced. The gears are Ford racing gears, so they've been replaced, although I believe the stock ones are pretty strong as well. The axle tube twisting issue is a thing. Until I can get it welded, right now I'm using the Shy Performance axle brace, which you saw me install a while ago. So it definitely adds a good amount of added strength to it. And then on top of that, once I get moved and get settled again, we're definitely gonna get those things welded up, so no worries there. The last weak link really is those wheel studs that I can think of, and so everything else on there is pretty beefy, but it's definitely something I wanted to touch on, and that's super sketchy. So if you're launching off a bias ply or slick or anything like that, you want to be careful about that, and just, you know, getting low 60 foots. 1.6 60 foot, in my opinion, isn't that great. I still think the car has more. However, from what I've seen, a lot of people get 1.7, 1.6 60 foots with a bias ply slick on these cars, so maybe it's not as bad as I think it is. So we're gonna definitely upgrade those, and hopefully that'll take care of that issue. If an axle breaks, it's less of a big deal. If the actual freaking wheel pops off and I drag that whole back quarter panel on the ground, I'm gonna be really pissed, and that's not cool. So I'm definitely upgrading those. So let's go ahead and talk on the topic of breaking things. Let's go ahead and talk a couple things. A lot of people equate a slick to braking stuff, and that is true in some extent. So the weakest link on most of these cars is a street tire is it's going to spin before it breaks something. When you have something like this, obviously it's really not going to spin that much. And so one of the reasons I chose a ET drag bias ply instead of like the street ESS where it's more streetable, or the drag radial option, is because it has a very soft sidewall. And I'm going to try and slow this clip down enough so you can see it, but what happens is the wheel starts to take off and it actually creates a little bit of a wrinkle all the way around the tire. And what that is enabling the car to do is, when you're doing that, it is taking up that initial drivetrain shock. So when the clutch comes up and everything engages, there's going to be looseness all the way throughout the drivetrain. One way to eliminate that is, if you're a more qualified driver than I am, you can raise the clutch up enough to barely feel it moving forward, apply the e-brake, drop the e-brake, drop the clutch, and everything is tensioned already and you get a better slip, lower 60 foot, but I'm not there yet. So this is probably the safest way to not spin, but also kind of keep some cushion in the drivetrain to not break things instantly. Probably why I haven't sheared those off yet, to be honest. All right, so this is with the wheel off. I'm just trying to see if there's a better angle I can tell. Maybe you can tell, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just being paranoid about this, but regardless, I definitely want to make sure I can check everything, like even movement. So maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I'm going to be replacing these guys anyway, just to be safe. It's not unheard of for them to snap, and it's something I want to be careful of. Next thing I want to talk about is the shocks. So this is what I've learned since I ran. So basically, the way the Tokiko, I think that's how you pronounce it, d-spec shocks work is they're a single adjustable. So what happens is, as you up, so they have two settings. So you have all the way hard, and hard is in reference to the actual feel of the ride, not in the dampening power. So hard is pretty much the shock really isn't doing anything. It just lets the spring move up and down as fast as possible, and it tries to keep everything, it does minimal dampening. And then soft is referring to the soft ride feel you get, and that is actually meaning it's doing the most amount of dampening, so when the axle moves, it pulls the body of the car down with it, as opposed to letting the spring just kind of do its own thing. So what we did at the drag strip is I went ahead and made these both to their full soft setting. And the soft setting is pretty much, the theory behind it is, what's going to happen is, when this axle starts to drop as the tire drops into the pavement, instead of just dropping the axle, the shock does its job and pins the body to the axle, pulling everything down together, and then it'll help get the squat down in the back of the car. And then by having it difficult to pull away, which is called rebound, I believe, and then once it gets down, the compression is also hard, so it does get down in the shock a little bit. It doesn't immediately bounce right back up, sorry, that's rebound. The compression is that initial part. And pretty much you want these to be relatively stiff, from what I understand as of right now. That brings me to the fronts. So at the track, we didn't mess with the fronts at all. I actually brought out some Allen keys so we can figure out where the heck the fronts are even set at. But what I believe was happening is, this is after showing it to a couple people, I'm not taking credit for this, but what was happening is, as the rear dropped down, the front you can definitely see rise up, and then there's not an infinite amount of movement. So if it's not dampened very much, this is where a double adjustable comes in clutch, and I'm probably going to upgrade to those at some point in the near future, but I want to keep messing around with these a little bit more before I do so. You want it to be able to come up very quickly and then stay up and not drop back down. So with these being a single adjustable, I'm pretty sure they're on their looser settings. It lets the front end come up, and then it just bounces right back down as soon as it hits max extension, or pretty close to it as far as the weight transfer is concerned. And once that front end came up and started to come back down, the rear end comes back up and I lose traction. I think that has a lot to do with my spinning issues. So we need to get these hardened up, and it's better to have it stiffer up front than loose, from what I understand. Again, so when the weight transfer happens, the rear will drop down. The front's not going to come up near as much, which might hurt a little bit on the initial weight transfer, but overall it's going to be better because it's going to slow that rise and kind of keep everything a little bit happier. And then when it does hit top, it's going to slow that descent and kind of keep the weight in the rear wheels. So that's what we got to do as far as adjustments are concerned up there. All right, so I went ahead and about to pop off the fronts to swap these out for the street setup. But I wanted to show you guys, this is about max height extension. Tire is off the ground by about 1/8 of an inch, but looking at the videos, I mean, I think it is maxing out after all, because there's not as much, I mean, it's really not as much room as I thought that there was going to be there. So it does kind of make sense and back up the theory as to why it's unloading again in the front end. So something interesting. I was sending these videos off to a couple different people to try and get some input on this, and something they were talking about, one particular dude in particular caught it, and then I looked on the forums, backed it up, and it makes sense. So the sweet spot for PSI on a bias ply with these cars, from what I understand with a 15-inch, is around 16 to 18 PSI. And the reason is these are pretty much a 4,000 pound car. This is like 3,900 pounds. It's definitely over 4,000 with me in it, because I'm like 230-ish. So if I understand this correctly, basically as the weight transfer is happening, it's a lot of weight to be putting on basically just 15 pounds in the rear. And one of the other issues is that, so as you can see in this video, it's kind of pulling away from the rear, and we're getting some tire crinkle, and then the tire's kind of bouncing back up. And basically what's happening, from what I was told, is it's not enough air pressure in there, so the axle's able to move down faster than the car can follow it, and it starts to wheel hop pretty much. So that was the other thing we were talking about, and what we're gonna do to fix that pretty much, said go ahead and try the next time out at 18 PSI, and then work around that area and drop it down by about half PSI per run until it gets dialed in and hooks consistently. So I'm definitely gonna go ahead and do that next time around. Yeah, that's just another thing I'm learning. It's kind of cool. I wasn't aware of that, so I thought you guys would be interested. Okay, so I was going to film this a little bit better. Unfortunately, these Allen keys, like, I don't know what it is about these particular sizes. I feel like they may have created their own custom that's in between sizes Allen key for these things, which is kind of irritating because I don't have the proper adjustment tool, which is basically an Allen key with a little knob on the top. So I went ahead and tightened them all the way in, and then backed them out to 7 on both sides. So that is full soft. I don't know what they were set up before, to be honest. So, but next time we're out, we're gonna have to see if that does the trick. All right, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to go over on the car. I'm pretty sure I touched on everything that it was kind of being weird. We know we need to change for the next time out. I'm gonna be upgrading those wheel studs just to be safe, whether it actually needs it or not. It's hard to say. The crap, that sun's bright. On top of that, I think that's about everything. So it's hard to say where those fronts were adjusted at prior. And it's also very possible, these things have been on here for a good number of years, seen a good number of launches. It is very possible these things might be on their way out. So I think I'm gonna wind up upgrading down the road to probably a Viking double adjustable QA1 or something along those lines. So that should help kind of get everything back in shape to where it needs to be. So anyway guys, hope you enjoyed watching the video. Kind of a low action, but I did want to just talk about some stuff and kind of get it off my chest and over to you guys, bounce it off, see what you guys think. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Gonna be taking a break on the car a little bit, got some truck upgrades coming, and then we also got to knock out those wheel studs before we head back out. So I'll see you in the next one, guys. Take it easy.